Hi everyone, thank you for joining us at the Microsoft Fabric UK user group. I'm your host Leon Gordon and I'm here with my co-host Pragati Jain.
Hey Leon, how are you?
Fantastic, thank you Pragati. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. Quite excited for today's session, as usual. Every time we come up with something new. So yeah, looking forward to today's session today.
Me too. It's going to be a fantastic session, and I know we were discussing just briefly behind the scenes that we know that there's a certain football match being played at the moment for England. So thank you for everybody that is joining us as well, because for me at the moment, dare I say this is maybe more exciting than the Euros at the moment in terms of what we're going to go through this evening or this morning for our guest that's joining us.
Yeah,
excellent. So shall we dive straight in?
Definitely. I think I can't wait for today's session. So let's just go ahead.
Excellent. So in today's session, we're going to take a look at all of the latest with DAX Query View with Microsoft Senior Product Manager, Zoe Douglas. So Zoe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Hello. And yeah, so I'm excited to show you kind of all the new stuff we're going to be doing with DAX Query View.
Excellent. We're very excited as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll jump straight in. So we'll hand over to you.
All right, sounds good. So one of the things I want to go over is we just had some updates in the June release, right? So we added in some more info functions, namely the very popular ask, which is for calc dependency, right? So I'll go ahead and demo that here in a minute. We also added the kind of optional input parameters, right? So the restrictions on the analysis services DMVs, you can now do them on any of the input functions. It's most critical for the calc dependency one because it has the required one, which is the query. It's not required, but it's the one that probably makes it the most useful is to specify that query. Additionally, we also fixed one of the bugs with copy. If there was any kind of blank cell in the results, we got some reports that the copy wasn't working. We also now, what isn't in the release blog was that we're actually also handling multi-lines when you paste into Excel. So I'll demo both of those as well. What I want to show here, though, before we get into the demo is there isn't any kind of formal documentation on the info functions themselves just yet, which is something that I'm working on. But they all are same as the DMVs that were available in analysis services. And so I've included actually some links here. My screen is actually a little bit big for this page here. But here you can see the columns of kind of DMVs, and then these are the restrictions, right? So you can use this documentation with the info functions to kind of get a feel for what some of those enumerations, like if it says data type is 1, 2, or 3, you can actually find that by using these. Let me see if I can go up to one of the TM schemas. Oh, they're probably down. Looks like it's alphabetical. So you can actually kind of get into that documentation over here. So I'm going to start including some more of this information available as well. And then eventually we'll have the info function thing. So, all right, so let's get into DAX Query View, right? So we have the documentation, and I have a few blogs where I've gone into the Copilot, specifically when I first put in the info functions, and also just DAX Query, right? So I have those links here, but let's go ahead and actually take a look at some of these in action. Right, so here I have just a demo data set here and I'm going over to DAX Query. When you first come into the DAX Query View, you have the sample query already created, right? So it'll just generate one, so you can immediately hit run and see that data, and you can see kind of how this is evaluated, right? So these are using DAX queries, using table functions in DAX to return a table of data, right? This is not the most basic, but this is a pretty basic one, right? So if I go to sales, we also have quick, what we're calling quick queries, where on the data pane itself, you can click on tables and columns and measures and have DAX queries generated for you, right? So we have the sample one that's generated when you first open up DAX Query View, but then you can also come to the sales table here, right click, and you have these quick queries. I'm going to try and zoom. Right, so we have the quick queries here on the table are going to show a data preview, show the top 100 rows, and also show column statistics. Right, so if I do this is showing also top 100 rows, but if you do the one on quick query, it's actually going to specify all of the columns by name. So then you can adjust it as needed, right? So maybe you don't want to see the product category or the geo ID. You can comment that out using this comment button up here and run the query again and remove, of course, that comma there, right? So you can kind of adjust it as needed. You can remove, this is using select columns. So you're here, this one is actually using select columns. And the reason why we do that is that if it's not going to kind of aggregate any of it, it's going to show them as is. If you have duplicate rows, duplicate values, it's going to show them all in here, right? So if I wanted to see the whole table, this is just doing top 100, I can adjust this. Now I have to still keep a table argument here. So we still do sales. And then we hit run now, it should give me all the data here. So this is about 250,000 rows and it's limited, right? So obviously I have a bit more data in here than is, we are limiting it to kind of 1 million cells. So it'll kind of stop at that, which would be, you know, so depending on how many columns you have, it'll kind of adjust the row count that comes back. Right, so here we see that query come in. And now if you go to a specific column here, let's do maybe, let's do one of the dimensions here, geography, right? And we can also come in and see a quick query on a column. You should show data preview. And this is actually going to do a distinct. So it's going to show you kind of what are the values that you're going to find in this column, as well as the column statistics. Now the column statistics on, let's go look at sales again. So I can do a column statistics on sales, and that's going to give you kind of a table profile, right? So this is a very large query that it's generated, and it's going to give you that profile that you usually get like in Power Query. You can see kind of the profile of the table, see the count, right? So this one actually has just over 1 million. It can show you the distinct count, you know, where's your high cardinality, and how many null, the minimum values, max, and then it has some columns over here that adjust depending on the data type, right? So for a string value, a string or a date, sorry, the median doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so it's kind of NA here. And when you go over, you can see all of these different columns. Now, if you look at the columns individually, then you'll see kind of which ones apply to what. So here we have a string value. And if you do the column statistics here, it's just going to show you kind of basic ones, right? So you're going to see the min, the max, the distinct values, and how many rows. We have 58 rows. It's just looking at kind of 2 distinct values here in the country. Now, if I want to go look at a numeric field, right, so we see sales here. And if I go to sales, I can do the column statistics, and it's going to show me different, right? So it's going to show you that this has not only it's at over 1 million, but it's an over 1 million distinct values. There's no nulls, right? But you also see like the median, the mean. We also see standard deviation, number of zeros, number of evens and odds. It's all odd numbers. Okay, I didn't realize that. And then we have the P25 and P75, right? So we see very numeric column profiles here. And then finally on the date, you can also see column statistics specific to dates, and this will include like the range, right? So you can kind of get a feel for the range. This is 10 years of data, how many months, how many days that it has. So these kind of give you a really good a way to kind of explore what is in, what data is coming in, what data has been loaded in semantic model, and all that information right here in DAX Preview. It also gives you kind of an idea of some of the things that DAX can do when you look at some of these formulas that we have included. Right, so those are the quick queries. Now on measures, and you can just close these guys. These all open up a new tab so that you can just kind of, when you're done, you can close them out. Now for measures, we have more information here, right? So In measures themselves, you can come in and now you have you have evaluate and you have a define and evaluate and define with references. Thank you, Jusil. And then we have, so the evaluate will simply just give you the measure with a summarized columns. This is not the most simple way you can actually represent a measure in DAX query view. They have the most simple way. So a lot of times what people try to do when they want to say, oh, I need to see what this measure is. I've seen and I tried it first too, right? You say, okay, let's evaluate this orders, right? So we have orders and we'll try to run it just like that. Orders. And if I click run, right, we say this expression specified is not a valid table expression. And that's true. It's not. It's a scalar value. The most simple way to get this to return is to simply put it in curly braces. And that will actually convert it to table, and you can get that same value back. This is similar to like, if you do evaluate or if you do evaluate with select columns, we do it with summarize here because typically orders all by itself as an all-up number may not be actually what you want to analyze, right? You want to see it broken down by some other column in your group by column, or you want to filter it, that kind of stuff. So here I'm going to do, let's do year, right? So we can see number of orders per year. I can add that in, run it, and now I can see the orders per year. Right? I think this is generated data, so it's not very exciting. You can see there are some variation. Right, so you get started. The idea of the quick queries is to make it so you don't have to know DAX queries to start. DAX queries are obviously not new, but and unless you have been using DAX Studio a lot, maybe you're not familiar with the syntax. We wanted to kind of give you ways to quickly get started and be helpful in maybe the next step that you want to do once you've done that. Now, you can also, what's cool about this is the DAX query syntax supports this define statement, which works with measures. And then you have this kind of new measure workflow, right? So here I can hover on a measure. Let me see if I can zoom and hover. And it will show me the DAX formula behind it. It will show me the name. It will show me the description, right? So I've added this description on this measure, and it'll show me the DAX formula. Now, if I click on it, we also get additional actions. We have these code actions, and now I can actually define it. So I can have the DAX query view will actually just define it for me. Now I have it in my model, but I also have it as a query level measure defined, right? Now I can have measures that aren't existing in the model also defined here, and they only exist in the context of this DAX query. And when you have them in both, what happens is the DAX query definition takes precedence when you run the query, but you haven't actually modified the model measure yet. So let's do this one. Just going to multiply it by 2. Now, if I hover here, you will see that it's going to show you both, right? So you'll see in the peak that this has been modified for this DAX query. And it's showing you actually what the definition is still in the model, right? So I can run this. I can see it multiplied by 2. And now I also have this CodeLens action that says, hey, I see you have this measure in your model, but you've modified it. It's got a different DAX formula. And because now we can also, let me see if I can zoom. I'm sorry. Zoom the wrong screen. There you go. So you get this CodeLens action. It shows up kind of in between the lines, between line 1 and 2. You see this little update model overwrite measure. And you'll notice there's a nice big button up there by run. That's brand new. It's not out yet. That's a sneak peek for you. You can do this for multiple, right? So that's the cool thing here is you can actually have multiple defined here. And then you can make changes to multiple measures, especially measures that you're creating kind of on top of each other, in a whole stack. And then you can modify them there. And I can simply click this, update my model, and now they're both in sync again. I can hover, I can see one definition, and I can simply revert it back if I wanted to. Now let's look at something a little bit more complicated here. So you can also get from the quick queries itself, right? So I can come in here and I can say define and evaluate. which will get me into that kind of initial state. And then you'll see this one here. This is a year-over-year orders. It's also referencing orders measure itself. So if I come here and I can come and hover here, you see orders is count of sales, right? So if I wanted to see them together, I can just simply do quick queries define with references and evaluate, and that will put them both in here. So now I have the measure up here for orders. And let me see if I can zoom a little, sorry. So we have the measure for orders and we have the measure defined for year-over-year orders. And I can then multiply this one by 2, right? And I can see, run it, and I can see that change. And I can also do not only one, but I can multiply, I can do like kind of both, right? So if I do, maybe I wanted to add that, you know, if it's return 0 on that divide function, I can format things. I can kind of see all of that information right here. And I can run it to test to make sure I didn't mess anything up. Even test it out. Okay, let's show this by year. Maybe I don't want to make sure I didn't mess anything up. Okay, right. So we have all this information available to us before we actually make that change. Right, so I can remove that guy, and I can still update that other change that I made here quickly. Right. So those are kind of some base functionality of the DAX query view. Another one that I like is if you have I have these measures, I have year-over-year costs, year-over-year orders, right? And if I do my year-over-year define and evaluate, right? And I want to change this maybe to, we have one for costs, but we don't have one for profit, right? I can probably have Copilot help me here, but another one I like to do is, if I click on that, you can see that I can see all the instances of orders. That's actually what I want to change to profit. So I can do change all occurrences and simply change that to profit. I think I removed one too many things here. So let me just go back. There you go. And I'm just going to type in profit. Okay. So now I've changed all of those occurrences. I can run it. Again, add in that year again, see that evaluated in the right context, looks good, and I can add this to my model, right? So I can go ahead and make these changes like using some of those code editors. There's a ton of like different things in here. So the change all occurrences one I really like because it's very useful for kind of these kind of things. You'll notice here when I highlight, let me see if I can zoom a bit. When you highlight this, and this actually happens in the DAX formula bar too, you can see the little arrow for tabs and the little dots for spaces. So if it, in a grand debate of tabs versus spaces, you can kind of see what's used. So here, this is using a mix, which is really interesting. But there is actually kind of command palette to convert indentations to spaces. Now they're all dots. And you can also do command palette to do convert indentations to tabs. Right, so whichever way you want to have it formatted, there are some kind of neat little features in here that will let you do either way. Right, and it'll just do that way. There's a bunch of different, like if you want to know what kind of where the shortcuts are, like we have like, you know, copy line above, copy line below, you know, the change all occurrences I just did, it actually has a shortcut to Control F2. You can do, and you can kind of see the shortcuts here as well in the command palette. But yes, yeah, it's very cool. You can do convert back and forth, delete line, delete duplicate lines, right? So there's a bunch of different things in here. The query folding is a big one as well. Anyway, so there's a ton of little nuggets in here that you can use. So the query folding is kind of neat. It depends on your kind of indentation. You can collapse certain blocks. We tried to do the formatting. So we have to have a format query here. And so we've been working on making sure that formatting, when it does, it actually works really well with this query folding so that you can collapse things that make sense and have it kind of fold in a good way and actually have their code be readable as well. We want to, in the future, kind of add more options on the formatting. but that's not, we don't have that as a timeline just yet. It's coming out soon. All right, so the other thing we have is those new info functions. So I want to kind of show off a couple of those, right? So the info functions are, again, those analysis service DMVs. They're not new per se, but we are bringing them into DAX, which gives them a number of benefits, right? So when you run this info.measures, right? So we can see this info.measures here. And this is exactly what happens in the DMV. I think it's like the SQLite syntax, but you'll see this kind of ID for each measure, the table ID, the name, description, and then you have the data type as an enumeration, which is again 20. You have the expression, the format string, right? So you have a lot of information that's really great. But when we added it as a DAX function, previously with the DMVs, you couldn't join them together. So even though we had the table ID, we weren't able to kind of join them. And then renaming was kind of a challenge as well. But now as a DAX formula, you can now use it like any other table in DAX. So now I can use select columns to rename them to what I want. Let me zoom in a little, right? I can rename them. In my first one here, I'm just saying, okay, let's go get that info measures, and I'm going to rename and only bring in for those columns that I actually want to use. So you can limit the columns. And then I have my tables here. So I went and got info.tables and I pulled that table ID and the name. And then I simply joined them, right? So I was able to do this because you're naturally able to do this with DAX. And then finally, I return the combined, and I have it just what I wanted to have for the analysis of my measures. The measure, the description, the formula, and the home table, right? So you can kind of see these in here. You'll notice some of these also do have, multiple rows in here. You can see they're kind of concatenated, but when you saw them in the peak, they actually have multiple rows. Previously, when we copied these, they would kind of, overrun the cell in Excel. So let me see if I can open up Excel real quick, and I'll show you that we have fixed it. There's still one, if it has a double quote inside the expression itself, it's still overflowing, but we're working on that one as well. So that's a bug that we are aware of. It's kind of a known issue. We also added an additional copy thing here, so we can copy the entire table. If you do it that way, you will copy with headers. So this is something else to keep in mind, right? So let's see how this works. I paste the year range. The year range has a double quote in it. So let me just go and only select these guys. The year range is the one, because it has that double quote in. So let's just ignore you for a second. I'm going to delete it. But you'll see the other ones that don't have a double quote. Let's do this one. And if you expand the cell, it's going to have those multi-lines in a single cell. Now this one brought in there. If you go ahead and select and then copy cells, go back to Excel and paste in, it'll do it without those headers. And again, it will still bring them in the multi-line incorrectly. None of them have a multi-line. Anyway, so those are kind of some of the newer copy functionality we just also released. So try them out today. And now you can see that null does no longer block a copy functionality out of the result grid. All right, so this is not the only one. So it's measures. I have this one's for columns. Again, this is kind of the basis and then result. If you're wondering where these kind of joined versions are, I do have them in the info blog post, right? The relationships one here, I actually have on my personal blog. I did this one afterwards. So this is the relationships in the model. You can kind of get a peek of it. And then we had another community member who did a really great combination for relationships. And then I decided to try my hand at it as well and do my own. I like things a little bit more verbose when it's documented. So here I went through and kind of have this rename version down here. So all the relationships in your model have a name, but it's typically a GUID, right? It's not very exciting. So here I built my own that shows cardinality, direction, which way the relationship is going. And then I specify which is the from and to table. Now this is kind of interesting because if you're doing row-level security, sometimes it's really helpful to understand which is the from and to table. And then again, then we get to the cardinality, and I did a lot of times it's said from to or to from. I like this one better. One row in geography matches many rows in the sales geography table, right? So you can get in here and customize these. The point is you can customize these as much as you want, right? So if you want to see it documented in your semantic model in a particular way, you now have the full ability to do so when you are looking at these info functions. One of the things I did include here as well is like the state. When you look at it in the original one, it is what they call enumeration. It's just an ID that is saying kind of what that state is. So here they're all ones, and I went ahead and it's actually documented here in the .NET what those enumerations mean, and I put it into a kind of switch statement here. Let me see it. Where did that link go? See, follow the link. And here, this is where the information has come from that I pulled for that one. It's again from the analysis services documentation on these enumerations. All right, so those are all of those kind of info functions. So let's see kind of what you can do when you come in here. Actually, I have one other thing, which was if you are used to using especially like DAX Studio, and you want to kind of see the DAX behind each visual in your report, right? You can go to the performance analyzer. You can refresh your visuals, and you know that how this visual gets data is actually by writing a DAX query. And if you want to kind of see what that DAX query looks like, maybe it's not showing a number, you're not quite sure why this number is not showing exactly as you expect. You can click Run in DAX Query, and it's going to pull in that DAX query behind that visual right here for you. And it kind of gives you some insight into how these visuals are built. Now, they are not probably the way, if you were going to write that query and get that data, it's probably not the way you would write it. These are built really for the visuals. So it's really great for actually troubleshooting the visuals. Not maybe the best way to get a DAX query written for you, which is why we have the quick queries, which are going to be more kind of the way people would look at it. These are really created so when you switch, between the different visuals, they will kind of understand what is the data that this visual is looking at in a kind of unified way. All right, so we have that one. And then let's take a look at, I'm going to switch over to my other report real quick. So now this one here is utilizing the sample data, right? So I already have some stuff in here. So let's go ahead and actually, I want to set a new one. So if we start a new report, and maybe we're just starting out, we got some data, and I want to kind of show a little bit kind of how we can use DAX Query View to help us when we're just getting started. We have some data, we're not quite sure what to do with it yet, and maybe we'll do some little bit of Copilot in here as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and load the sample data, which is that financials table. And this is so that you can follow along, you can try this out later. You don't have to go anywhere, get anything. It's all included in desktop. So here I've gone ahead and loaded that data. Oh, I don't know where that one showed up. Okay, we'll give it a second to load. There it goes. So one of the things that it gives you, and another thing we have coming in the pipeline for DAX Query View is we want to bring it. So right now you have to have the data in Power BI Desktop. You have to be editing the model and creating that semantic model with the report, or to use DAX Query View. But we're actually wanting to bring it for live connected. So if you are just live connected to a published semantic model, we want to give you DAX Query View to help you kind of explore that data, which is really critical because you don't have the table view, right? So So you can come here and go to the table view, or you can go to Power Query and kind of see some information. Okay, so you can click here. I can see I have these segments available to me. I have these countries. If I go to Power Query, we have like the profiler and stuff like that. But especially for Live Connect, you don't have that information. And then also you can use this with directly Semantic Model once in Live Connect. The other one is having DAX Query View for the web. Those are also both coming. All right, so here we have the, we just loaded the data. We don't have anything exciting happening yet. And now I can come in here and use DAX Query View to kind of explore this data. So I can say, okay, give me some column statistics. Now I can see what all the columns are. I quickly see there's 700 rows. And I can see kind of where the high card noise, like, I can see segment, country, and product are all kind of low. They have low distinct values. That nothing has a null in it. I can see the date range here is 2013 to 2014. Right, so I can kind of really get a quick view of the data. This is kind of similar to, I think DAX View has like kind of a hover peak on columns. I used to use it a lot when I was looking at semantic models that were new or new data, and I kind of get a feel for it. So this is a kind of similar idea, but you can kind of do it in a DAX query. And now I can get in and I can say, okay, I see that there's this discount band. Let's see, what are these discount bands? Okay, we can see that we have, okay, 4 values. And then we also see we have some discounts, and we can do column statistics here and just kind of explore what are these discounts. We can see the discounts range from 0 to almost 150,000, right? And so we can kind of get some view here. A lot of times I want to see is, maybe I want to see what is the kind of distribution, right? So if I'm in this discount band, right? So I can make it, and I can just create one myself, right? So I can say evaluate, and I say summarize columns. Let's take a look at that discount band. Let's say, so discount. Let's see, discount band, and let's say discount. I need to bring in the column here. And maybe I did that wrong here. We'll see how it goes, right? So we can do this guy, see if it works. Let's see. Financial. Oh, I forgot the quote here. So you'll see this quote here. It said, query, it says 320. So it means line 20, line 3, and then character 20. Now, can I be determined? Right, so we have this. Maybe I just don't need to have this guy. There we go. There you go. Now I got it right. Right, so now I can see that band. And now I can also add in maybe the count of rows. So we'll say rows, and we'll say count of rows in the financials table. Right? So I can quickly now see that we have not many, only, 50 out of the none, and then we see low, but most of them are actually in the medium to high category. So we can start kind of analyzing this data. We can add maybe the min, max, average, discount in each band, that kind of stuff as well, right? So we can say, average, and we can say average of the discounts for each one, right? And we can start analyzing this data, right? So we can start understanding what's here, maybe what's kind of useful and that kind of stuff. Now I don't have my measures yet, and I can create my measures here. I can also use kind of Copilot to add some measures. Maybe I'm a little bit lazy, want it to suggest some measures to create. So it's going to do kind of some easy sums here because I don't have anything yet, right? So let's go ahead and keep this query. And it's also, and I'm like, okay, what did you do? You added some comments. I can even have it explain the query at this point, right? I say, well, what are you doing in this query? And have it come back with a description. Now you'll notice that it actually does include comments here. I'm going to zoom in a image. So it's going to say, the measure to calculate total number of units sold, measure to calculate gross sales. It's kind of telling me what it's doing. We have an error. So let's go ahead and say, I want to keep this, looks like it can't. So let's try that again. We're going to suggest the measures. I'm going to keep this. I can even actually run that before I keep. That was one of the changes we made, especially for Copilot, is that you could actually run it before you went ahead and kept the query. So you can test it out before you say, okay, yeah, I'll keep that one. You can do it that way. Now this one gave me a row. So I can say, maybe I want to show this, show these by year, right? It's doing row instead of like a summarized column. So it's not exactly intuitive to know that I have to change this to summarized columns and then add in that year. So let's see what Copilot comes back with. And you'll see that the blue here, so I highlighted everything, which is that kind of darker, and then the blue is showing. It looks like I'm using a kind of internal build, so I think it's just not going to work here today. But this is the idea, and then this button here is brand new. It's not out yet. It's just a sneak preview. And now I can run these, look good, and I can actually change these. I can add these to my model with one click. I'm going to add all 6 of those, and you'll see them over here in my data pane. Alrighty, so that's kind of, I don't think there's anything else. If you want to look at some of the documentation, all the stuff that I went over today is available in the documentation. So if I come over to, we have write queries, that's Copilot. So we have the work with the DAX query view, right? And it goes over kind of what an evaluate and define statement are, how to open it. I have a little layout available. It's not very big. Okay. And everything in that ribbon is explained here. We have the format, commenting, find and replace. You can do regex, find and replace if you want to get real fancy. The command palette, and then the command bar is where that run is. And now we have that new button. So I need to update the docs here. And then we have the suggestions and IntelliSense available in the edit. The kind of hover to see those informative peek on those measures, the code actions, and the light bulb. Now the light bulb will only work if you do not have a defined lock. So if you click on a measure and you say, well, why isn't this showing me my quick actions? If you have a defined statement, you can only have one define. We're working on a way to kind of merge the define so you can define additional measures. But right now you still have to keep it as just one define. So if you have a define, it won't show. And then we can kind of use CodeLens. That's that text that shows up in between when you have a measure defined that's already in your model. And that goes into this kind of measure update flow, right? So you can define it, you can evaluate it, you can define it, you can update it, and then save it back, right? So you can stay right here. You're not clicking around. You're not going to the DAX formula bar. It's all right here for you. And the result grid is where you're going to see those results. We are still making improvements to that. Right, we want to add some like column widths. I've gotten some really great feedback on that. Maybe add some formatting and things like that. If you have an error, you can copy it. And the query tab. So I didn't really say this before, but if the state of the query is actually shown in the query tabs. So before you run it's blank, you saw a lot of those little green dots when I ran a query successfully. If you have an error, or if you cancel it. Also, if you have kind of a longer running query and you want to just keep it in there and then go to do something in another tab and come back to it, it will run in the background. Now saving is when you save the PBX, the DAX queries are saved. If you're using developer mode, right, you can use DAX queries and they actually show in their own folder in the Power BI project, right? So the Power BI project separates the model and the report, and it has the TIMDL, and then now you have the new PBIR format. So you kind of have a human readable version of the semantic model in a text file, and you also have a human readable of the report in a text file in there. And now the DAX queries are saved as .dax files in their own DAX queries folder in there. So when you publish it to the Power BI service, they are there, but we don't have DAX query view in the service just yet. But they will stay with it, and then working on making sure that they stay when you go into the maybe Git integration, if you're doing that kind of stuff. There's some really great articles out there about people using these DAX queries saved in the model, like to do quality checks. So you can have a DAX query that you can say, check for certain thresholds in your data. And then what they're doing is maybe on refresh, they can actually see and make sure that they can actually access those as part of like a deployment pipeline to make sure that certain things are met before it's actually successfully deployed in Git. So those are kind of a big topic that's a little bit sideways to this, but something that is available for them. The data pane includes those quick queries. And this gets into kind of what all those quick queries are when they're available. We have the tables, columns, measures, and then the integration with the performance analyzer. And then we have additional kind of limitations, right? So some of the limitations are mostly when we see some noticeable lag with the parser when you get to a lot of lines. If you have like 500 lines in the code editor, we're working on that one still. Format created no longer breaks. FrameKX, I need to update this. And then query tabs are allowed to be moved now. So I need to update this one. And then we are working on, which one was it that was also in here? Some of the result grid, like binary columns, if you have those in your model, those will actually break your visuals as well. They won't come back for a DAX query view either. So you have to remove binary columns. I did a demo of it with a binary column, and it would just keep running forever. So the binary columns are not supported either. And again, this is getting into that kind of limitation. If you have more than 500 measures in your model, right, we will not let you define the all measures in your model. Let me show you that action real quick. That one we actually do kind of block, not because, just because of that, when you have so many lines, it becomes a little bit difficult. But if you come here, you can say, define all the measures in this model. Now here I can see all my measures, and I can quickly now even add in, let's do, which model is it? Segment, I think it's on. There we go. So now I can see by segment, all the measures evaluated. You can kind of quickly get an eye for, okay, what's happening with all my measures? Are they all working properly? Is there something wrong? A lot of times I find that if I do like a demo and I've changed one like ×2 or something and I've forgotten to change it back, right? So that happens, and then you can see them all. Here you can do, this one only has just a few measures, but you can do like kind of find and replace, and I want to see kind of which ones are using the sales, right? You can kind of search across all your measured DAX formulas in one place. So you don't have to do that input function, take it to Excel, and then search. You can do it right here in the DAX editor and make changes. And again, if you make multiple changes, you can just update them all at once. Is there any questions that anyone has? Because I think that is about it, other than, actually, let's show one more thing here. So we have this documentation. I have deep dive for DAX query view Copilot, the info functions, and DAX query itself. And this one goes through, I pulled an example and then ran a bunch of things that you can kind of see. So we have all that documentation. And then also for DAX queries themselves, right? So we actually have a large documentation available for DAX queries, right? So if you're curious as to what you can do with DAX queries, and how it's helpful, and the value, the syntax, some more examples, right? You can run these in SQL Server Management Studio. You can run these anywhere, and you can kind of see the different optional, like there's this start at, you can do kind of a paging in DAX queries. There's a start at and end at. This gets more into the define. You'll notice here the define actually includes vars. So you can actually define vars and then kind of use them later. So it's almost like temp tables. You can actually also define tables and columns, but that syntax is not 100% supported yet. And so once that is 100% supported, then maybe we'll do CodeLens for those as well. Right, so you see that note, the query scoped table and column are not for internal use only. You can do it. They may produce runtime errors, right? So we just have a caution with those, but they actually are available if you want to play around with them. It's very cool. And we have some examples in here as well. Alrighty. I think that is all I had for you guys today. So if you have any questions, also reach out on LinkedIn too. Happy to answer any question.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Zoe. Absolutely great session. And I think a lot of our audience is very happy with the way that things are progressing. If I can flash up some of the comments that we've had coming in throughout today's session. We've had DAX query view is getting better and better. Thanks for bringing this cool feature to us, Zoe. And it's from Dersu.
Thank you, Jasil. Very cool.
Mr. Edmund says getting better and better than DAX Studio.
Don't tell Darren. Don't tell Darren. Darren's fantastic. So, and Darren helped out a lot with the DAX query view, right? So Darren is part of Microsoft, the customer advisory team for Power BI, and he does the amazing DAX Studio. I mean, I use DAX Studio so much. Previous to joining the product team, I was doing consulting, and so when we were doing DAX query view, the first thing I was like, Darren, tell me everything you want this to have, because you have all this experience. Obviously, you built the tool because you wanted to write DAX queries, right? And so he was an instrumental, huge help in all of these features you see as well. Huge shout out to Darren for having that tool available for so long and supporting it. And then I think that really helped justify bringing this into Power BI Desktop, right? So having that, desire from the community to run these DAX queries are really cool, but maybe like, oh, who wants to write a DAX query, right? You can see the popularity of SQL queries kind of helps the story as well. But yeah, huge shout out to Darren.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to give that shout out as well. Pragati, we do have a question. Would you like to go ahead and ask this one?
Yeah, definitely. So the question comes from Akin Jole. Sorry if I'm just mispronouncing your name. So he's asking, how do I activate Copilot in my own Power BI?
Yeah, so like if you have your own Power BI tenant, right? So I have my own Power BI tenant, and what you need to do is the Fabric capacity, if there's a trial for Fabric, that does not give you permission to use Copilot, right? You can use notebooks, you can create lake houses, you can do direct lakes, semantic modes, you can do all the cool things that way. But unfortunately, Copilot is a paid feature. Now, if you already have a premium capacity, typically, I don't know, I could never quite afford my own personal premium capacity. But, if you have a premium capacity, that will actually allow you to use Copilot, right? You can't use all the other Fabric cool stuff, but you can use Copilot for Power BI. Now, if you wanted to spin up, so what I do in my own, I have my own tenant as well that I host all my reports on. And what I do for demos for Copilot on that when I'm testing it out is you go to Azure and you can create a Fabric capacity. So you have to do it in Azure. And what's cool about that is you can actually pause it. Right? So the premium capacities previously you had to it was on. It was on 24/7, and you paid a lot of money for it to be running 24/7. Whereas you can now go to, if you want to just try out Copilot, you can go and spin up this capacity. Then you have to go back to Power BI service and then change in the licensing where you kind of add that in. You have a licensing, you can say it's pro, premium per user, or you can specify the capacity you now have running on your tenant. And then once you put the workspace in that capacity, then you go to desktop. Like for DAX query view, you go back to desktop. Click on that Copilot. You have to be signed into desktop so it knows what tenant you're in. And then you would go ahead and click on the Copilot, and it would prompt you to pick a workspace. And you need to pick the workspace that you associated with that Fabric capacity. And then once you've done that, now you're good to go. You can use Copilot and stuff like that. So a lot of times I do that with my personal one. And then once I've done testing, I can actually just go ahead and pause that Fabric capacity in the Azure. And that way I'm not getting billed. But yeah, and then I think there was, I don't know who, I forget, but there are ways you can kind of auto pause it after so much time and stuff like that if you're, concerned about like the cost overrun as well. I did that one time. I left it on for a whole day. Right. And then I was like, oh no, I should do it for my demo. And yeah, anyway, so a little bit of overrun. But yeah, so you just gotta, it gives you that flexibility that you actually didn't have with the premium capacities. Like a lot of people went to kind of the different A SKUs and the different SKUs in like even if you have Azure analysis services, right? You can pause it, you can run it, you can pause it, and that can help you with the costs as well. So yeah,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect, thank you. The rest of the comments really are in terms of how good the demonstration's been. Thank you for sharing your knowledge as well.
You're welcome.
And so Donald as well, thanks Zoe, Leon and Pragati, thank you. And then Zoe, I do actually have a question for you if I can. So
Yes.
when we were specifically looking at the command palette,
Yes.
my days of SQL Server development and writing lines and lines of T-SQL came to mind. And one tool which I swore by in those days was the Redgate SQL prompt or the SQL tool belt. Now, what this enabled you to do was to be able to write small acronyms. So, for example, SSF would give me a statement, select star from, and it would write the syntax.
Oh, I see. Yep.
Absolutely. And so I couldn't help but think that from a DAX perspective, is that going to be something that potentially will come into the query view and kind of be an enhancement on the command palette?
Well, Leon, we have this lovely ideas site that I think you should go and add that to, because that's amazing. I got another question on another demo I was doing about like maybe even templatizing the quick queries, so you can create your own quick queries, right? And it's kind of similar to that, but actually having it as like a command palette option, right? So that's kind of the same vein. And so I keep hearing this feedback. So if we get like, this is kind of customer feedback, like we have the share feedback button in the product, right? We actually, I'm actively looking at all that feedback, right? And it's amazing, like the copy bug that I had with a blank cell, right? That came up for the shared feedback, right? I all of a sudden started seeing a whole bunch of people complaining they could not copy cells sometimes. And then we looked into it and we found the bug and we were able to fix it really quickly. So I really want to iterate like that shared feedback and like ideas like this, right? We had a ton of people asking for like updating multiple measures, right? And we added that in sooner than later because we had a whole bunch of people asking for that. So like, yeah, so absolutely. If you have ideas like this is great. Like, that's an amazing idea. I'd love to implement it. And if we get people kind of asking for it, then I can say, hey, people really want this feature. And if we can add it in, we will.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Like I say, I know we spoke about this before the call, but just to say it publicly as well, thank you very much to you and your team and the rest of the wider team at Microsoft for all of the work you're doing in both the Power BI and the Fabric space as well. It's really amazing.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'll pass it on to all the engineers and the designers. I mean, they put in a ton of effort into the DAX query view. We really wanted to make it a great experience. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you once again, Zoe. And myself and Pragati will just go ahead and close this evening's session now. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
So once again, an absolutely riveting session. Those of you that haven't tested the new features and functionality of the DAX query view, please make sure you do so. And obviously follow me and go and leave some ideas and some feedback as well, because as we are seeing, Microsoft are really taking it on board and then baking it directly into the product. So it all counts. And on behalf of myself and Pragati at the Microsoft Fabric UK user group, we'd like to thank you for joining us, because you could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us this evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.